So welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. We are proudly presented by SPI Logistics, and we are live at TMSA Elevate in Austin, Texas. We got Kevin Coomes here with us. And you, what's your job title at Chain now?
I am EVP of Sales now at Chain.
And what does Chain do?
So Chain is AI.
Oh, no.
I'm kidding.
We just lost everything.
Everybody just stopped paying attention. No, I'm kidding. No, actually, our core function is really doing like operations management and trying to bring all of the, specifically on like the visibility side, but now we're working in like booking, offer management, carrier engagement, that sort of stuff. But specifically, we're trying to automate all the low-hanging fruit. That's what we're trying to do. So on the visibility side, if you think about every load, you're geofencing it, you've got ELDs running, but there's still like 7 to 10 touches on a load that you've got to get an ETA, you got to get documents, you got to do a check call, whatever. We're automating that stuff. We have a workflow engine. We bring all the communication into one platform, so it doesn't matter if it's email, text message, whatever. We centralize it to the load.
Oh, interesting.
So it doesn't get lost somewhere.
So it's not a million, I mean, you might have a million tabs open, but at least
Exactly.
It's in one tab
the dispatcher emails, the driver texts,
Okay.
whatever, all comes in one place. And then the reps can just chat back, and it can email back to the dispatcher, and it can text back to the driver. But the Autopilot, our AI function, we build all the SOPs, so a lot of that stuff they don't have to do. This happens, it's getting to this location, the ETA is this, reach out and say, hey, did you arrive, or are you gonna arrive on time? And it looks like it came from the rep. So like text the driver just gets to, hey, did you arrive on time? Driver says, yeah, I just checked in. And then the Autopilot actually takes it and puts it back in the TMS, and they never touch it.
So is this all, I guess, like a open source effort, or is it all in-house, like custom built technology?
Some of it's custom built, some of it's open source. So like we have our own model that we're training for a lot of logistics tasks, so it can identify exceptions, it can identify assistance requests for a lumper or something else that's going on. But then yes, like we're using a lot of other language models to plug into it, because certain ones are better at certain things. Certain ones are better at data, image recognition.
Oh, interesting. I would love to hear, like, dive a little deeper into that. Like, which large language models are the most beneficial?
Yeah, so we use GPT, we use, what's the other one that we're using?
Claude.
Yep. We use Claude.
Gemini.
We use Gemini. I don't think we're using Grok right now yet, but we've talked about it. But they all kind of do different. They all like GPT is really good with language stuff, but like other things like Claude and some others are really good with more abstract things, images. There's like, so it just really depends on the situation. And that's kind of the cool thing about it, right? Because you can use them for different purposes. So if it's like an image recognition, we can apply that concept. And for us, the Autopilot doesn't really matter. It just gets the data.
Oh, interesting. Because I was going to say, like, how does a user, one of the bigger, I guess, complaints about, especially with ChatGPT, is that how do you know what model to use and for what?
Yeah,
so it's the user making that decision.
Right, exactly. Okay. So like that's the whole point. Like that's what Chain does, right? Like our product, our IP, we decide what needs to be done when.
Oh, interesting.
That sort of stuff. So yeah,
and that's because I was listening to an interview with one of the co-founders, is Annalise, and she was great on the conversation.
Annalise and Param are like two of the smartest people I've ever met.
And they used to have a logistics company, and they built Chain.
They had a carrier. They had 15 trucks.
Oh, okay. And so then they were in the business, and then they developed this technology to solve that, which I think is a little bit of like the inverse of maybe some other AI, that's come into the market as of late.
Yeah, the story's wild, actually. Like their story is wild. So Annalise was in medical school. Param was a chemical engineer. And
not dumb people.
No, exactly. And they were together, but not married. And at the time, and Param got bored with his day-to-day, doing chemical engineering, whatever. And he wanted something different. And his family is Punjabi. They're all West Coast, trucking, a lot of them. So he just quit his job and opened a trucking company.
Wow.
As you do.
As one does, yeah.
So he got 15 trucks, opened a trucking company. And then Annalise, in her like spare time, like when she was out of school or like summer or whatever, she was helping him dispatch, do different things. And then they're both from San Jose originally. And they sat down and they're like, this is just like broken. Like all these things we have to do to like deal with this broker or that shipper or whatever, like answer these questions, do these things, or like we need information, but it takes us 2 hours to get it back, but we need an appointment time or a pickup number. And so that's kind of what led them to do this. They literally were like, we think we can fix this. Priority one was actually one of their customers at the time. This is like actually 8 years ago when they first like formulated this idea. And priority one was still relatively small comparative to where they're at now today. And they sat down with them and they're like, if you could just build a workflow engine that just connected to our TMS, brought all the data in, when these things happen, just alert our rep, say, hey, dummy, go do this. You know, like do something. Don't forget about this. So that's how it started. And then 2 years ago, all kind of changed with all the AI and all the language models and stuff. And so they applied AI to it. And now it's just automated.
Well, I think that is, so when you hear about all of these different workflows and processes, and I try to hammer home with my audience of just how much like process management and process documentation, willingness to rip it all out and start fresh with a whole new set of eyes on, what should work and what shouldn't. I would imagine that, working with Chain, that it would alleviate a lot of that brain power that you need to map out all of those different processes in order to even figure out where to put technology.
100%. And that's kind of the thing though. But when you come into these things, and like that's what I always talk about. Like I talked about this at BCS on a panel, actually. You still need to know your business, right? Like there's only so much Chain or any automation solution or AI solution can do for you. You still have to understand your business and your SOPs and what you guys do and what your customers require. But the goal with Chain and what we're trying to do is facilitate that so it's easier, right? It's not like we're going in and programming all these. We have an engine. It connects to the TMS. We have all the data. Okay, what's the mapping, right? Like this happens, these conditions are met, do this. And so it's a whole engine that's easy to program. Or not program, but like basically pick your, like I can do it and I'm not a dev, it's like, yeah. And so, but when you're coming into it, change management like is important. Like you have to understand your processes, what's required. So it's also about like, it's about internalizing those SOPs, but it's not like that easy that you just come in and it just works. Like you do have to understand these customers require these things. But you're right, at the end of the day, once you get that in and the SOPs are there, there's no person leaves, another person comes in. I don't have to retrain them on all those SOPs. There's no way I have to forget about it because it's all there. And so the Autopilot just goes to work. A lot of our customers, 95% of those touches, they don't even.
Oh, wow.
They don't even do anything.
So what does a typical customer look like for Chain?
Brokers and 3PLs primarily today. Because that's where a lot of that uplift is, right? A lot of that uplift is on the broker 3PL side because they're having to fill out those gaps for their shippers. We could service shippers and carriers. It's just not our core function right now. But they all have the same problems too. There's so many solutions in our freight tech environment where I think brokers get very concerned. They're like, oh, they're going to go serve shippers. They're going to put us out of business. It's like, but these are all problems that you all face, right? Like it's like they can make your life easier if a shipper uses Chain because now you don't have to wait for information, right?
True.
Because they're using Chain, you're automatically getting it back out of their system. So for us, it's really about that experience of broker, carrier, shipper, and speeding that up, right? The way I bring it up with people is like a human being can't monitor 1,000 shipments at once and then have 1,000 simultaneous conversations, but a computer can do that. And that's where the AI stuff becomes very interesting because that's a lot of stuff that people are outsourcing to Columbia, right? Or whatever. After hours, weekends that people don't want to do anyways.
How do you find, I guess, the balance? Because logistics has always been about relationships, but we've also had just an insurmountable like injection of capital and businesses going into logistics tech. So how do you, I guess, walk that fine line of implementing tech, but also keeping your relationships solid?
Well, I think that's the interesting thing. It's part of the reason when I left green screens and I was looking at what I was going to do next that I came to Chain because I was looking at all these different solutions and these AI companies and there's a lot of different things that are going to work, but it was like what are the low hanging fruit problems that human beings don't want to do? One, and two, it's not necessary.
Nobody wants to
right?
respond
Like,
to a tracking request.
No, exactly, right? Just to get an ETA. And like a driver doesn't want to like pick up the phone, just like give you an ETA, right? Or they don't want to pick up the phone and have to call you or a dispatcher just to get instant response to get an appointment time or something, right? Like it's there, it's in the TMS, we've got to just get it back to them. Don't wait on somebody to do it. That's the low-hanging fruit. The stuff that isn't is that 5% of exceptions and assistance requests and stuff like that you might have to get involved, send a comm check or like do something else. They blow a tire, you need to update the shipper, you need to get on it. And we help with that because the Autopilot identifies all those things. Oh, there's a problem, alert the rep, respond and say, cool, get us a new ETA, but then tell the rep you need to go maybe make sure this is all good for the shipper. But like outside of that stuff, it's like they should be trying to drive more business, right? Like the relationships are, how am I talking to my customer, seeing if they're servicing more of their needs, can we get more of their business? Same side on the carrier side, right? Covering loads, make sure you're expanding your carrier base, make sure you're working with the same carriers over and over with all the fraud stuff and stuff going on, right? Not post and praying. So it's like it frees up their time to do the relationship stuff, right? And the way I think about it is it's like revenue per head. How do you get revenue per head from $1 million to $2 million to $3 million to $4 million without having to hire more people to do all these menial tasks? So like it actually adds to the relationship when you think about it, because it allows them to actually spend more time on what's necessary for the relationship.
Yeah, we were just recording with Mike Mikulik of SPI, and he was talking about how, with a lot of their technology, like relationships still matter, and going and doing site visits with your customers, taking them out golfing, like that creates that relationship with them.
Yeah.
And, just doing those simple things that aren't scalable. And I think with all of the technology, that's one thing that, there's a lot of, I guess, sort of fear around, implementing new technology. You're going to be not hiring as much. You're going to be, there's a lot of, I guess, unforeseen circumstances that might come from that. But if you're in this to survive as a business owner and as an employee of a business, like you want to be as efficient as possible, because salaries are usually the first thing to get cut. And so when you can free up that time and go golfing with a customer that is doing a lot of business with you, that it's weighing those pros and cons.
Relationship, right? Well, and that's interesting too. The salary thing and the head count is, we're a low margin business. Like I work in SaaS now and I have for the last 9 years. Like the margins are much higher.
Yes.
But the gross margins are higher because it costs a lot of money to pay people to develop these tools, right? It makes a lot of sense when you break it down. But in our industry on the trucking side and the brokerage side, the carrier side, it's very low margin, right? You're running 10 to 15% on truckloads. If you're lucky. Yeah, right. So it's how do you eke out more margin points out of that, and then also, like you said, drive more revenue, free more time to go out and spend that time with the people and do those relationship building tasks and that sort of stuff. And like that's where it's not popular to say, but we're not necessarily gonna it's not about eliminating jobs, it's just about repurposing people, into more revenue driving things or margin driving tasks. Because at the end of the day, track and trace tasks, that sort of stuff it's not helping the bottom line at all, right? If anything, it's only hurting the bottom line because you bring on more loads, you bring on more customers, like, oh, we need 10 more people just to manage the operational tasks. It's like that doesn't help.
Doesn't move the needle.
It doesn't at all. So.
And so you'd mentioned green screens just now, because I think you have such and I think we kicked off this conversation with saying you have such a fascinating background. You actually opened up. I mean, you spent time with a TMS provider, green
with
screens, Revenova.
At the beginning.
I'm curious. How do you think the, logistics technology ecosystem is evolving with spending all this time at, two really big heavyweights, and then now with Chain?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm a glutton for punishment, first of all. I just keep going back to the beginning, right? I was like the 6th or 7th employee at Revenova, and we had 8 customers when I got there. I was the 4th U.S.-based employee at Green Screens, and we had 6 customers, I think, when I got there. And Chain's a little further along, which is interesting because like they've bootstrapped it, which is also pretty cool. It's different in the current environment, right? Like the current environment's changed. There's a lot of money
I'm a
coming
bootstrapper.
in. Like
I
you
respect
said,
it.
exactly, right? And that's kind of what I liked about Prominent and Lease because they bootstrapped it. I think the logistics landscape with tech, though, has changed in that we used to be so reliant. And like when I got to green screens almost 10 years ago now, or whatever it was, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, it was so heavily reliant on the TMS provider. You know, like anything you did, anything, you know, like workflows or, you know, things you needed in the process of executing freight, it was like, hey, can you guys go build this? Can you go build this? Can you go build this? And I think traditionally, if you look at the companies like McLeod, Mercury, Gay, you know, the traditional Aljax, those that were there ahead of a lot of these other newer solutions, that was kind of just the way they operated because that's what was expected of them. Now you have this capability of doing what a lot of other industries have already done. And I liken this to like things like Google or Apple or whatever. It's like Google and Apple don't go out and just build all these apps, right? They leverage other companies and then they integrate. Like Google has Google Meet, but they integrate with Zoom and Teams and all these other things. Like, so choose your provider. Okay, Google doesn't care because you're still using Google Calendar. I think we're kind of headed that direction, and I think the TMS providers are starting to get on board with that. Last week, I was actually in Birmingham at McLeod, and they did their Impact Summit, Impact, and it was very AI-centric, but it was very partner-centric. And the idea was like talking about the certified partners that they have in their program and leaning on companies like ours and others, Highway and DAT was there, you know, a lot of other, Triumph was there representing green screens and all that, leaning on those people to fill a lot of those gaps. Because McLeod's like, we can't build all of this stuff. It's too expensive and too time consuming. So I think like that's the direction that is positive for our industry. Right?
Yes.
Because like the more entrance to the market, more innovation, it allows the execution platforms to execute and then us to go fill all the space in between.
I would think it too. It also creates a stronger relationship with your customers if you allow them the tools that they're already using and comfortable with and that they want to connect more with the data that they're using. That's one thing that you should be taking advantage of from a business perspective.
Right. And we see that, we're at TMSA, right? So you think about CRM, think about marketing tools, you think about HubSpot, Salesforce. They've been doing that for years, right? It wasn't go build a payments platform or go build something like go build MailChimp, or, you know, like just integrate these things.
Don't reinvent the wheel.
Right, exactly.
Like, you don't
just
have
go
to do that each
integrate
time.
these things. And they've acquired some things, and I think we'll see that happening in the next few years.
Yes.
I think we're going to see some of these companies that have grown tremendously. You think about companies like Highway that have grown so fast. I mean, Green Screens got acquired by Triumph, and they're folding a lot under their umbrella. They acquired ISO, whatever. But I think we're going to start seeing some of that, which is also, it scares people because they're like, but I like having my little boutique tech company that I work with outside of everything else. It's like, yeah, but at the end of the day, when you have a more integrated solution with other solutions under one umbrella, that's just the way of the world. Like that's how tech
versus
works.
like the closed ecosystem of what we kind of came from.
Exactly.
Where I
right.
remember trying to work in McLeod for like sales and marketing efforts, or mostly marketing efforts, to assist the sales team, and it was a goddamn nightmare.
Good luck.
Like,
I know.
But it was a glorified like export this email list, and that was what I had to work with. But if I was able to integrate McLeod into like a MailChimp or a HubSpot, like it would have been a game changer for me.
Right, and I think we're headed those directions. Like, I think we're starting to see more of that. And again, especially with like the AI solutions and that sort of stuff, I think we're just going to see. It's too expensive to just develop all, like, there isn't a big enough player in our space on the tech side to just do this all themselves. We don't have Oracle, we don't have Google, we don't have Apple, we don't have SAP, whatever. It doesn't exist. So you kind of have to lean on the providers to integrate and do that stuff.
Now, I don't know how to segue into this except for the fact that you have had other career background in, especially with a country that is a top of mind for a lot of folks in the U.S., and that's China. you have an extensive experience with not just like living there, but doing business there. Tell us about how that journey started, because I'm super fascinated by just running a business in general in China.
That was the first startup I ever worked for.
That's great.
Trial by fire. So I actually studied Chinese in school. So I graduated K-State in 07, got my minor in Chinese. I lived there for a year as a teacher, learned I wasn't a teacher. I didn't go, I wasn't a teacher by school. I was a poli-sci major and studied Chinese, but did it to keep studying Chinese so I could keep learning. Came back in 08, economy crashed. So I was back for a year and a half, trying to find a way to go back to China, because I did really enjoy it. I enjoy the cultural aspect, the learning, right? Just being exposed to all that. And then I got an opportunity with a guy that I went to Kansas State with that was starting this company over there. So I got introduced to him. We started talking. Totally different world. We were doing energy efficiency, like building efficiency technologies, this sort of stuff, and.
That's why they're kicking our ass on energy right now.
They got in way earlier, yes. I mean, they did because they knew they had a problem, right? Especially because they have way more people and way more energy usage. But so they, a lot of these companies, when they go over to China, they don't want to do, like, it's scary to do business there. You're afraid your technology is going to get stolen. You don't know the landscape. It's very different, in the way that you do business and execute contracts and do all this stuff. And so that's essentially what we were trying to do for these people, was like take these technologies from the US and another company in Israel and then help them get into China so that they had a partner that wasn't necessarily like a Chinese company that they were not so certain about.
Like a liaison. You're almost like a broker at that point.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, we were kind of, representative of their companies. This was like 2011, 2012, right? So this is like fast forward now, and it's like even, like all of this is blown up even worse with all the tension. But it was fascinating. Learned a lot.
What do you think is, it doesn't have to be logistics related, but what do you think are some of like the cultural, I guess, interesting moments that you were able to learn about? Or because I think for me with China, like I love learning about history, and with China in general, like they have so much history, thousands and thousands of years of almost a singular, population and culture, and what was all of that like the culture shock from the United States, where it's a melting pot, versus over there was much more uniformity?
Even when you understand it and speak Chinese, like I can't imagine. I had friends that didn't speak any Chinese, right? That wanted to move, do something different, whatever, went over there. I can't imagine what that culture shock was like. Like, because at least I could like speak the language and understand people. And then when I was there, I got pretty fluent. I was there for 3 years in total, at 2 different times, and so that made it easier. But yes, the culture shock is still drastic. It's interesting because we have like our personal lives and our business lives, right? Like, and a lot of it, especially in like our industry, is so small, it bleeds together. So we've known each other for a while, right? Like it starts to bleed together a little bit, but you still have like your personal life and your work life, and we kind of keep a separation of that and how things work. China, like things are so deeply, and I think this is Asia in general, but specifically China, it's so deeply ingrained together, their cultural stuff and their business and whatever, that it's like, it's very hard for, I think, Westerners to come over and understand that. I see all, you see all this stuff with tariffs. You see all this stuff going on right now with the trade tensions or the back and forth and whatever. And I think part of what happens to us in the Western world is like, we don't understand the negotiation isn't just like hardball. It's just it's different for them. Like,
how so?
There's a very distinct, the government in China specifically, but then the people, there's this distinct nationalism, right, that surrounds everything that they do. And a lot of that has to do with history, because they're Chinese and they're proud of their history, and, they kind of view the world as like infancy compared to a lot of the civilization that they had prior to a lot of the rest of the world, right? If you think about like the Middle Ages and prior to that, like Europe was still a mess, whereas like China was an empire at that time, right? And had a lot of advancements and had a lot of civilization, money, gunpowder. You know, like there's a lot of
They
that
invented
stuff that was
paper,
already
I think,
happening.
too,
with it.
like
Yes.
paper
Yes,
and-
paper, writing.
Yeah.
You know, like modern writing, right? Calligraphy and stuff. So like they see that as a, you know, part of, not just part of the country. Like we're proud of America, but like it's different in that like they see that as part integral to society. You know, so when they do business, that sort of stuff, relationships, it also leads to problems, right? Because there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of things that come out of this because of my family knows that family and connected to these people and we have political connections, but it's all China, so it's okay to like do that. So it's interesting in that regard because I think there's just a very different outlook on your like day-to-day life in China as a Chinese person because of that culture and that history. And so I think that's what causes a lot of the misunderstanding, right, that goes on when you have those political escalations, that sort of stuff.
Is it safe to assume that like the majority of the U.S. is more like individualistic versus like China that almost
Yes.
moves like a unit?
Exactly. That's a very good way of putting it. 100%.
That's what I've always gotten from their
Yeah.
culture is that
Yeah.
what's the famous phrase, like they think in decades, not election cycles.
Or longer.
Yeah.
You know.
Or no, they think in
like
centuries, not decades,
Yeah, I
or
was gonna say
something
it's
like
probably
that.
centuries. Yeah, they do because that's just it's relative, right? And so yeah, they do. They kind of it's changed a lot. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's changed over there, even since I was there,
Like how so?
politically and. Politically, it's kind of gone backwards a little bit, right? Where it's a little more nationalistic and communistic than it was before. Where I think, like when I was there in 11, 12, it was very different. It was a little more open. Like, I joke about this with people. I'm like, as a foreigner that was doing business, like you could have got away with murder because
Really?
it was more just like they didn't want international incidents. It was all economic, grow the country, grow the money,
interesting.
whatever. Whereas like now it's kind of taking a step back a little bit.
That's because I've told people like I want to go to China, like I want to visit it, and I get the apprehension like, oh, you're
Yeah, I think it's
You're not scared to go over there?
Safe. It's safe. It's always safe. It's just more so like I think it's just a different atmosphere now.
Yeah.
Right? They're a lot more scrutinizing of foreigners in the Western world and that sort of stuff because they've become a little more closed off than they were before. I think it's still there's still tons of expats there doing business, whatever. So it's not like a scary thing. But I just think governmentally, whatever. I think the nature of it's just changed.
just a different landscape of problems you
Yeah,
gotta
like
navigate through.
visas have changed, and getting over there. It used to be so easy to get a business visa and go over
Really?
there and that stuff. Oh yeah, and that's all kind of changed, and that's political, right? It's political, but yeah. Again, But you asked about like the cultural side of doing business and that sort of stuff. I mean, it's kind of how I got into freight because they're an export economy. They're all more focused ocean, air, whatever. Like people don't sit and talk about trucking like we talk about here, where we're more closed off, like in terms of that, right? Like we're more of a centralized economy. They are more global.
I was talking to somebody, and I don't know how accurate this is, so well, whatever. But he was from Germany, and he said that in Europe they don't have TMS software.
It's very
And I thought that was this. I was like, why doesn't every country have a TMS software? Like, does China have a TMS software? Like, what does their freight tech or logistics tech landscape look like? I don't know if you know the answer to that. I'm just spitballing.
They do, because I learned about it. Our Chinese partner of our company was an importer-exporter, so he did a lot of steel, timber, commodity stuff, which is how I learned logistics a little bit, and then came back and ended up in it. But they do have systems and stuff that they use. It's a little more rudimentary. It's not as complicated as a lot of the stuff we do.
Like, are they working off a Chinese McLeod over there, or Revenova?
They do have similar systems. Like they do have like software vendors and stuff that work on that particular stuff. But again, they're very local logistics in a lot of those countries. Well, specifically like Southeast Asia and China is still very local logistics, right? It's pick up the phone, call people, whatever. We also have 1.3 billion people,
right?
So there's a lot of people that have jobs. We worked out of our Chinese partner's office. The city I lived in when I owned the company was called Xiamen. Xiamen's subtropical, way south. It's right near Taiwan. It's like the closest mainland city to Taiwan.
Oh, interesting.
And we worked out of like the trade center area near the port because that's where his office was. And so we would walk downstairs and you'd walk through the trade center and it was like, kind of like a brokerage floor, a little bit like a brokerage floor. In the past, maybe a little more like Boiler Room, Coyote, Original, that sort of stuff 10, 15 years ago. But yeah, or like you think about like a stock brokerage floor, right? Or like a commodities exchange, like where they're literally all in these little pods and these little desks. And it's all different companies, but they're all like moving freight together.
Oh,
right?
interesting.
Like getting containers or getting consolidation space or whatever. So it's still very manual in that way. But it works,
What did you learn about logistics in China that you brought with you back to the States?
Well, so the international stuff is like how I got into it, right? And that's really where it differs, right? Like I feel like unless you go work for a freight forwarder or something, right? Or you work in that world over here, we are very, very more focused. We're so much more focused on domestic trucking or cross-border Mexico, Canada, like a lot less focus on international freight. And over there, everybody's an expert. Like everybody's an expert on container freight and air freight and everything else because that is the driver for their economy.
Yeah, because they're mostly export economy. Yeah.
Most of their economy is on that. And we're a huge import economy, but that's also why we're bringing the goods in and then it's got to get trucked and distributed and warehoused and whatever. And so it's different in that regard. Like you think about like how many brokers and carriers we have in this country, it's like the same there, but freight forwarders. There's like 50, 60, 70,000 freight forwarders in China, right? Because it's such a massive part of their economy. So it is very different. And I got a huge crash course in that. And that's how I ended up in logistics is I was working for a small tech company when I got back in Kansas City that was building a freight forwarding quoting platform deal. Got introduced to Joel Klum, who's a COO of Worldwide Express, who started Carrier Direct with Jet McCandless, who's P44 now. But they were just doing Carrier Direct, just now Metaphora, right? And Joel and I met, he's like, hey, we could use somebody that knows some of the international stuff because we're working with a couple people. We can teach you all the domestic stuff. 8 months later, after coming back from China, I moved to Chicago and then started working for them.
The rest is history.
The rest is history. So there were like 5 or 6 of us in that office in downtown Chicago when it started.
Do you think any of your experience in China has helped you kind of navigate maybe some of the education that's going on or needed to go on in the first, 6 months of 2025?
Sure. Yeah, it definitely, the tariffs, I mean, you have that experience and everybody's texting you. What do you think of this? You're
probably like, oh.
You're my local China expert. What is happening right now? And I haven't been there. And, I think the last time I was in China was like 2016. But yeah, it does. It helps you understand it a little better. If anything, what I've told people is like, it's not as scary as we think it is. Like, it's a lot of bluster and brinkmanship and like.
Making business deals.
Yeah, like we're not equipped yet. We're in a better position than they are because of Mexico and the young population and the ability to manufacture and still have that opportunity to do cheaper goods. Whereas like China is not in an enviable position. They have a lot of aging population and they have an export economy. And so they lose trade deals. Exactly. They lose trade deals. They lose that sort of stuff. People don't want to work in factories anymore, right? The rising middle class. That's bad for them. Like it's bad for their economy. So like there's, I think when you boil it down to the economics and the money, that's really where it becomes more important. And yeah, in doing business over there and understanding that, you have a lot of very wealthy Chinese people that are very, very, very wealthy that have made their money on this type of economy and this type of backbone that they have over there in doing trade with the West and different things, right? And that's been a huge central part to that. The government's not going to pull that rug out from under them because these people are happy with their billions of dollars, like that they've been able to do this when, if you're 50s or 60s in China and you grew up as a kid, you lived in basic poverty, and so you might be a billionaire now. So just think about that, right?
It's quite a leap.
Yeah, it is. Like we don't have we have some people that have done that, but it's not it's
more
a little more
millionaire
complicated. Yeah,
status.
exactly. But
It's
there's
not-
people in China that grew up in abject poverty because that was just the way their world was when they were younger. If they're in their 50s or 60s or 70s, a lot of them are billionaires now. So it's a very different dichotomy.
How do you think, I would imagine that obviously tariffs are affecting every logistics company, but how are they affecting maybe some of your customers at Chain? And how are you helping maybe navigate them through these difficulties?
It's tough. It's tough because, I mean, we've been in this freight market for what, 20, I mean, I was at Green Screens, right? So we watched all the rates and all this stuff happen.
Well, it's a
while I
couple
was
years
there,
now. What's
right?
this, 2022, I think?
Yeah. I got to Green Screens in November of 21. So we watched it in mid 22.
Oh, at the peak. So you got in at the peak and then you can kind of...
And then August, I think it was August 23, and then after that, it just really tanked, right? So we were already going through all that, the post-COVID stuff and what happened and the overcapacity in the market and all that. So we were already having these issues. And then you introduce this stuff with the political stuff and the tariffs and whatever. And then the pendulum kind of switched. It's different from, it's not rates as much as it is volumes, right? Because then we had the volumes before, but the rates were down because we had too much capacity. Now, if the volumes aren't coming in, it could be a silver lining because it could, not that I want anybody to go out of business, but it could put some of these trucking companies out of business that aren't operating well, that still have trucks on the road that maybe shouldn't.
The ones that came in during the peak.
That came in during COVID.
They thought fast money and...
Yeah, that we still need to get rid of because we're still very loose. We still have too much capacity. So the volumes come down even more. And we've already seen it. We're already seeing the effect of that a little bit. They paused the tariffs, but you're still 30 days out or 60 days out that they paused shipments or whatever. So I think that's been the difficult thing. I think people now, they're just jaded at this point, almost 3 years in or whatever we are now. They're kind of just getting jaded by the fact. So it's tough. It's tough on everybody because it's still depressed rates and tough to, loose market and whatever. But
everybody's pointing the finger at each other. You're to blame, you're to blame.
Yeah, but I think we've gotten to a point of at least a little stability where we're not seeing the rates just go down, or fluctuate up for 2 days and then go straight back to the bottom. I think we've kind of come up a little bit. I think the rates have come up, so that's helped at least create stability so people feel better at least, which is part of the battle. But yeah, I mean, it's still been pretty tough, right? I think we've still seen a lot of companies struggling, either getting acquired or going out of business. Hopefully, by the back half of the year, we see some of that stuff change. If this turmoil stuff and the tariff stuff kind of works itself out, which it seems like it will, again, with some of the stuff that's happened in the last 30 to 45 days. But yeah, I mean, on the brokers and 3PLs and the carriers, it really puts that intense pressure on them. If your rate's already low and then volumes decrease, it's like, okay, now we're not moving any freight.
And there's some carriers that are saying, I'm just going to park my truck during this time and not move anything and just wait for everything to kind of settle out. And it's like you got to have a good cushion in order to do that financially.
Better hope you do. You better hope you do in those situations. But again, though, it's like if they don't have a good cushion, far be it for me to talk about anybody's job.
Well, it
might not be. It's economics,
right? And it's applicable to every business.
Yeah.
You have to have that safety cushion. You have to pay it. You can't keep your head in the sand about these things anymore.
No,
and I think a lot of folks tried that, and tariffs hit you over the head, and you're out of business. And so you have to pay attention to these things.
Take it full circle though. The tech stuff. I mean, that's where it's going to improve our industry with efficiency.
Yes.
So that these effects, the acute effects of having these rate fluctuations or having these problems with volumes or whatever aren't as bad.
Yes.
If you're in a 20 to 25% margin instead of 10 to 15% margin because you've improved your efficiencies and you've raised you're lowered your OTR, right? And you're actually getting more gross or net margin, makes it easier to weather the storm than when you're running razor thin margins and then this stuff happens. So I think that's where it's interesting because the investment in tech has kind of waxed and waned these last couple of years as this stuff has kind of worked itself out. But it's that would be my lesson to people is but yeah, go invest in stuff that creates efficiency because that's going to be your instant ROI. If you can raise a few margin points, then market be damned.
If it's a bottleneck now, it's going to be a bottleneck when business picks up.
Doesn't matter, right? So create the efficiencies, raise your bottom line,
Especially with all, you should maybe have some extra time on your hands if you're not
go get more
moving as
business.
much. And so work on the processes.
Transportation, marketing, and sales associate.
There you go.
Go market and go sell and get more business.
Well, okay, couple last questions here because we are at, TMSA Elevate. What are you hoping to learn from like a marketing and sales perspective? How are you kind of honing in on your own like personal, because you have a really great personal brand. Obviously you're a subject matter expert. How do you kind of define what you're going to invest in personally at the personal branding level?
I'm curious to see. So this is my first time at TMSA.
Okay.
Right.
Welcome.
Dude, thank you. And I'm doing a panel and a speaking opportunity. So.
And a podcast.
And a podcast. Got roped in. It's funny how the speaking thing happened. Jen, they'd asked me to do a panel, and then and I was like, no, I'm excited, like new speaking opportunity and like new crowd and whatever, because I haven't been. And then Jen and I were at BCS, and Jen was like, somebody dropped. Do you want to do this speaking opportunity too? She goes, I told the education committee you'd be great. I'm like, sure. So, and I don't mind doing that stuff. It'll be fun. But for me though, first time here and talking to a lot of people that I don't normally talk to, right? Coming from tech, like I don't talk to a lot of the salespeople. It depends on the different brokerage or 3PL, depending on how their organization is set up and whatever, and where the technology applies. But I'm curious to talk to some of those people. Talk to Mike, right? Mike's actually my TMSA buddy from SPI. But like, talk to those people about like how are you approaching this market, right? Because it's like with Chain now, I'm very much focused on the operational efficiencies and that sort of stuff. But how are they approaching the market from a sales and marketing perspective? How are they differentiating themselves? Like, what are the opportunities there for myself from a tech side to make that better for them and improve that? Because honestly, I don't think we get into that much on the tech side, right? Like they might use a CRM or something, but we're so inefficient. This is going to sound so bad. We're so inefficient in this industry on the operational side.
Yes,
like we're so
which is a great opportunity for change.
And whatever, right? Like we're so inefficient on that side that like we're so heavily focused from a tech perspective on that part of the business that like we aren't really focused on the sales and marketing side as much from a tech avenue. And so I'm really interested to talk to some of the different people about that and like what their main focus is, how they're differentiating their services, doing that sort of stuff. Because even then, I mean, like that's what I'm selling with Chain to the people that I'm selling to on the operational side, as well as like for your people up, get more people selling, get more people driving more revenue, right? Get more people out there differentiating your brand. But again, like how are they doing that is helpful for me to understand from our perspective as a tech provider. But yeah, so I'm really interested to have some of those conversations with people.
Heck yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of people here that are either attending or speaking that are going to be able to speak to whether it's the marketing, one-person marketing team in-house or the one that's building their personal brand. It just is all over logistics in like a good and a bad way. You kind of can cut your teeth on a lot of things if you're a one-person marketing or a sales team.
Well, and the personal brand thing is interesting too. Like that's what I've told a lot of like all the reps that I hired at Green Screens and like different people I worked with at Revenova and whatever. I'm like, you really want to elevate yourself in this industry. Get to know people, and it's not about like going out there and being an influencer, but like you said, it's being a subject matter expert and like helping other people making those connections, right? Or where to go to for certain answers and that sort of stuff. I think that personal branding aspect has been really good for our industry, right? We have people like yourself and others that are like, come from the background of freight that are now doing this stuff to help people market their personal brand or like do these things. And in our industry, with it being such a incestuous network-based industry, right? Everybody's worked for everybody. Right. Like that's.
I try to even get podcast guests who haven't done the rounds.
Yeah, right. Tough. Exactly. I mean, that's what I said to you. I'm like, we've never done this. I've never been on your podcast, which is crazy. We've known each other for a couple of years.
I'm excited about because you've made your rounds, and when I know when the PR releases are going out.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you can kind of see the same people, not necessarily you, but you can kind of see the same people going on a lot of different shows.
For sure.
But I think
it's good. Like, no, it is. It's good to like have that experience or like share that background. And as again, the younger people that are doing this stuff or in sales or marketing in our industry, like that's fun to impart that knowledge to, like build that brand and do these things because that will help you just branch it. You'll get to write your own ticket. You get
And
to
trust as well. Like you're
Yeah.
developing that like and
Builds
trust
trust.
factor.
Yeah, for
And that will be valuable no matter if it's within your company or a company you might, join in the future. It's a way to
Exactly.
level up.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, well, Kevin, anything that you feel is important to mention that we haven't already talked about?
No, but I mean, we're at TMSA, so I feel like it's like,
We're about to learn. We're ready
grow
to
the
learn.
brand, we're ready to learn. I'm excited for the panels. And
Awesome.
and the opportunity to speak to everybody. And
Heck yeah.
That's actually really fun. Like, I've never done that. I've always done I've done AI panels or stuff on rates or things on tech or whatever. Now I'm actually speaking to my actual craft at a conference, which is different, weirdly enough. A little nervous.
No, don't be nervous. You'll be fine.
I've never done that though. Oh yeah, this is how I do my actual job instead of.
Well, it helps people understand your role and how it could
Right.
fit within their organization. And
Yeah.
I think with the beautiful thing about TMSA is that it's not going to have the thousands of people that, maybe like a larger conference would have.
Yeah.
So this one it feels less like it's like I have a certain people battery, and at the end of some conferences, it's very, very low.
Yes.
This one, I always come away feeling re-energized because it's the intimacy level of, less, it's around 200 people that come to this conference, and you build those.
More personal.
It's more personal, and you develop those lasting relationships.
Yeah, some of these
So,
conferences, you're right. It's just bounce one to group to group to group to group to group, and
it's a lot,
It is
but it's a different intensity level that you kind of have to gear up for.
Yeah.
So I enjoy I don't want to say slow pace because it still feels like we're doing a lot,
Yeah.
but it's a lot with people that you have built a core audience with,
For
throughout
sure,
the years.
for sure. I'm excited. It's gonna be
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. Where can folks follow you, follow more of your work, get introduced to
good.
Chain?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn, building my personal brand.
Yes.
But yeah, our website is trychain.com. So exactly how it sounds, exactly how it's spelled, trychain.com. Reach out to us, get a demo. People can always reach out to me directly. I'm pretty open if people reach out to me on LinkedIn. I like helping newer people in the industry or mentoring, how do I do this? How do I get into this? Or who can I introduce people to? Again, it's trust factor, right? And it's how you build the network. So,
Kevin,
Blythe,
thank
good
you
to
so
see
much. About time
Yeah.
you got on the pod.
Finally.